Hi, today I'm going to talk about how to manage imposter syndrome, my 5 step process to navigate it. Once, I was sitting in a meeting, it was a high profile meeting, and there were a lot of senior executives and leaders there, and we were building a leadership development journey. People were using a lot of jargons. There were consultants in the room, senior leaders, they were throwing names of authors and books and frameworks. And I was sitting there quietly listening. Not because I didn't have anything to contribute, and not because I didn't understand the topic, but because a familiar voice had started whispering inside my head. Everyone here sounds so intelligent. They know all the theories, they remember all the authors. Maybe they know more than I do. And then came the thought, what if I don't belong here? Now, here's the interesting thing. At that point, I had already spent decades in leadership roles, been a coach for a long time, coached leaders across industries and countries. I had read hundreds of books and also gone for various certifications. So there was no dearth or lack in terms of my experience or qualifications. And yet I felt like an imposter. So, can you relate to that? You can be highly accomplished and still question yourself. In fact, when you are going on the success ladder higher and higher, that's when the doubts also creep in. I was preparing content on imposter syndrome, and suddenly I caught myself thinking, who am I to teach imposter syndrome? I laughed to myself and I said, because this imposter syndrome has come up again when I'm thinking of teaching imposter syndrome. And a deeper realization came from there. Maybe I don't need to have complete authority over imposter syndrome as a topic, not academic research. Maybe I can talk about it because I understand it, because I have lived it, because I have sat in those meetings, and because I have heard those voices in my head. I have walked that journey, and perhaps that's where real wisdom comes from, not from the theory alone, but from the lived experiences. You see, one of the biggest triggers for my imposter syndrome has always been this. I have always admired people who could effortlessly carry a conversation, quoting authors, references, books, frameworks, and I would sit there thinking, how do they remember all of this? Right? When these things slip my mind, I have read so much, I have learned so much, yet for the life of me at the right moment, I don't remember or I don't recall these things that I must say to impress others. And look, that's where the difference is. The idea is not to impress others. The idea is to be able to bring real situations in front. Over time, I started noticing something interesting. Whenever I spoke from my own experiences, people resonated with it. Whenever I spoke from my heart and I shared a story, which was a real story, people totally connected with it. Whenever I shared what I have observed in myself, my teams, my lived experiences, that's where people connected. As I thought about theories and frameworks, I said, hey, listen, wait a minute. That's exactly what I was talking about, what's mentioned in that framework. The difference was that I had arrived there through my lived experiences instead of memorizing somebody else's text. And that's when I realized that this is something really powerful, to be able to dig down deeper into your own experiences and tell me what have been those experiences for you where you have really been strong and yet felt that maybe I'm not there yet. Theories are created by people who first experienced life. Someone who observed something, lived something, noticed a pattern, and eventually gave it a name and wrote about it. Why then was I discounting my own experience? Why was I treating lived wisdom as less valuable than borrowed knowledge? Does that resonate? And maybe that's a question worth asking yourself too. How often do we underestimate ourselves because someone else sounds more polished? How often do we discount our own wisdom because it doesn't come wrapped in academic language? So over the years, I have developed a simple 5-step process. Step 1, whenever I experience this imposter syndrome, I pause and I observe. I don't immediately react. I don't believe every thought my mind is producing. I simply stop and observe. I ask myself, what's happening right now, Mridula? Who am I with? What is the environment I'm in? What emotions am I experiencing right now? And more importantly, what is that chatter that's going on in my head? The minute you start paying attention, something really magical happens. That feeling starts to dissolve because that feeling is not outside, it is inside of us. And the minute it's being watched, it sort of dissolves. When you pause and observe, you start becoming aware of that story. Now let's see what is the step 2. Notice the comparison. You'll find yourself often that when you are in this kind of a mode of feeling imposter syndrome, is because you are comparing with someone else. Someone else speaks brilliantly, I compare. Someone quotes a study, I compare. Someone appears more confident and I compare them with myself. And here's the thing about this comparison. Comparison is almost never fair. And why do I say that? It's because we compare our weaknesses with somebody else's strengths. We compare our insecurities with their confidence. We compare our behind the scenes reality to their very polished presentations or reels. And naturally, we come up short. Human beings are wired to notice what appears brighter, shinier, smarter, or more successful. So if we are constantly looking for evidence that others are better than you, you're going to find it everywhere. And that's exactly where the imposter syndrome begins. So step 3, judgment. After comparison comes judgment. This is where the real damage happens because now we don't just notice differences, we assign a value to them. We start to decide, they are better, I am less. They are smarter, I'm not there yet. They belong here, maybe I don't. And notice what is happening then. You are judging them and also you are judging yourself in the process. You are placing them on a pedestal and placing yourself below them. And from that position, confidence becomes impossible. It's a losing battle all along. Don't you agree? Because you have already decided you're losing before you have even spoken. The moment I catch myself doing this, I pause and I remind myself, different doesn't mean better. Different doesn't mean worse. Different simply means different. Let's take it as is. And we are now going to talk about our step 4. So in step 4, you return to your strengths. This is where the real shift starts to take place. Whenever I catch myself comparing or judging, I ask myself, what are my strengths? What do I bring to this conversation? What value have I created in the past and what value I intend to create now? What am I uniquely good at? And the minute you start to focus on your strengths, the answers become very clear. I may not remember every theory. I may not remember every author, but I have something else, much more important and valuable, and that is my lived experience. I have over 3 decades of leadership experience, coached leaders across industries and countries. I've worked through challenges, I've made mistakes, I've learned my lessons. I have observed patterns, and when I speak from those experiences, people connect. Now, is that not true for yourself? In fact, recently I was conducting a session on Ikigai, purpose, goals, and helping people rediscover themselves. And the session got over. We had just a minute left for a question when one of the participants, asked me that I plan everything. I have a goal ahead of me. I do all the mini milestones setting also. And then something external happens which throws me off. I go off balance and I start to become very anxious. I get overwhelmed and I struggle to move forward. And in this, my whole week is lost. As I listened to her, an answer emerged. I said, when things don't go according to plan, pause and reflect what else is going on. Just step back and watch. Maybe your plan is not working, but there is always a plan that's working. Watch your emotions, watch your reactions, watch your thoughts, and ask yourselves, what is life trying to show me right now? And that's an important question. Because sometimes what looks like a setback is actually a redirection. Maybe a prevention from something worse that might happen or opening new doors for a new experience. One of these experiences recently happened with me. For 2.5 years, I was trying to uh, make something happen. And it was hard. I did all the planning and pushing and, reaching out to people, and just things won't work. And then 2 years later, when the time was right, we were sitting together, me and my mom, and effortlessly, somebody came up and gave us a solution to that. And we looked at each other and smiled. And again, just in a couple of days, I realized I have been doing auto pay for 2 years on some kind of subscriptions, quite a lot of them actually, that I was not using anymore. And as I started to go back and do the research and count, I realized I have lost a lot of money. And this feeling of financial loss would have otherwise thrown me into a frenzy. But because I'm practicing a lot of consciousness, I just immediately paused and I said, okay, I have had this big loss. How am I feeling right now? And you won't believe it. I was much more calm and centered. And I said, well, this has happened. Now let me cancel all the auto pays. And I took whatever action I took. But something else happened very magically. That same evening, I got an IT income tax refund of exactly the same amount, which I was waiting for almost a year. So, sometimes things unfold in ways that we cannot see yet. And that's why the power of observation and pausing is so important. It moves us from anxiety to curiosity. And I'll go now to the last step, which is gratitude. This has been transformational for me. Whenever I find myself slipping into feelings of lack, consciously, I bring my attention back to what I already have in the present moment, the opportunities, the people I love, the growth opportunities that I have, the blessings I have, the guidance I have in my life. And I shift my mindset from scarcity, what I don't have, to what I have, which is abundance. And you could do the same. Gratitude says, look at everything you already do. Imposter syndrome says, you are not enough. Gratitude says, look how far you have come. How beautiful, isn't that? And slowly something lovely starts to happen. The comparison starts fading, the judgment starts softening, the anxiety begins to settle, and in its place comes a feeling of wholeness, a feeling that all is well. Right? Put your hand on heart and say, all is well. A feeling of self-trust starts from there, which is so much pressure than any other things that we can have. Because we stop measuring, we cannot improve. Sometimes imposter syndrome has, if it has been visiting you lately, you must just really follow all these 5 steps and you will see how quickly you are able to jump out of that. Pause and think about how you're feeling and look at whether you're comparing or judging. And if you are comparing or judging, shift your attention to your strengths and what you bring to the table, and also stay in gratitude. Your wisdom matters, your journey matters, and the world doesn't need another copy of someone else. It needs a unique expression of you. Now, if this resonates with you, come and join my free webinar masterclass in which we are going to dig a little bit more deeper, and also wait for my next video. In the meantime, you could subscribe to my channel. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.